And now I'm going to screen share real quick. All right. Okay, I will try to make sure that I am switching the proper screen share controls. I know that that's kind of a bummer last time, so I'm trying to be aware of that, and so bear with me while I get through this. Okay, so you'll have noticed that I've provided you with a fire particle package. And this is a particle system that I've made, and I'm going to show you how I made it. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an opportunity to play around with it. Now, I'm going to go over the directions for part 2 of your assignment. And just to be clear, with the fire particle package, you may use it as a template, but you should not use the same assets, right? Like, if you want to make a fire, and you want it to be stylized, you'll have to paint your own sprite sheet, and that will make a lot more sense once I get through it all. But you're welcome to take a look at it to see how some of those settings are in the system, and we'll go over all that a little bit. But I wanted to give you guys something to play with and something that we can go through together. Okay, so next, make sure that you've gone through your homework feedback. I've graded everything. I believe we're all up to date on that. And yeah, I don't have anything here. So grades are up, and I've updated them, and I've provided you with written feedback on it. I didn't do a recording on this one because they were very short, right? It was just kind of a glimpse on like the mood and atmosphere of things, and I think a lot of people just did the very bare minimum, so there wasn't a lot to go over. So with that in mind, please review the feedback and make sure that you don't have any other questions before we move on to part 2 of the assignment. If part 1 had some issues on it, either your map or your scene, you'll want to correct them first before moving on to part 2. Okay, so yes, this lecture is being recorded, and of course don't forget your checkpoint discussion. This one's a little bit easier than last time. I know that I laid a big one on you before. But this time, since we're going to start going into the things that guide the player and that are fun and intuitive and eventually juicy, right now, what we're starting to kind of zero in on is that whole idea of immersion. So, for this week's checkpoint, I would like you to answer for me, when you hear the word immersion in games, what do you think of? And can you describe a game where you found immersive and why? This will probably be a little bit different from person to person, but I like to have you think about it now. So go ahead and give that a quick answer for this week's checkpoint. And now, the Parable of Professor Tig Honest and Dr. MacGuffin Part 2, 20 points due May 18th. There is going to be a Part 3, so if this doesn't feel complete, that's all right. We're going to keep going on this project. So, this is going to be your level map. Based off of the pre-planning you've done in part 1, I want you to now map out your level. Let's just go through the assignment. This will be easier. For this next portion, based on your part 1 feedback, which you can find in the assignment comments, create your map from start to finish. You may use Unity primitives and the first-person controller. Now, if you would like to use 3D models or assets, you may, but you must create them. No downloading from the asset store. And there are reasons why, but I'm not going to go into that right now. Considering the talk I gave on affordances last week, I want you to place your first-person controller in the room where you spawn in, put a capsule in the room to represent Dr. MacGuffin, name him Dr. MacGuffin, and put a cube to represent the knowledge in whichever room the knowledge is going to live in. Craft a playable map, guiding your player through using any of the following affordances, which are all of them. So, you may use explicit, defined, cultural, or inferred. And if you are having trouble remembering what those were, you have access to the lecture I gave, plus the talk I gave with all of the slides, and going through the slides will be faster. So you can do that. Okay, so edit the first-person controller to feel like your thematic goals as close as you can. This doesn't have a defined correct answer. For some folks, if you want it to be scary or creepy, your character is going to want to walk slower, right? If you want it to feel more fluid and motiony, you might want to remove some of the head bob to that. If you want it to feel fast-paced and rapid like an adventure, You might speed it up or really have a difference between the walk and the run cycle. So there's no right or wrong answer, but there is inconsistent with your goals. So that's what I'm going to be grading based off of, how you get your first-person controller to feel like your thematic goal. Create the color and lighting story to try to match the mood of your character arc. Now, this also doesn't have a right or wrong answer, but if you're going for spooky, probably going to have some weird darker colors, greens and whatnots. If you're unsure of a good color palette, just steal one from a film for now. And just quote, give me a reference of what film you were taking from. A lot of games, and especially in game cinematics, we take from cinematography all the time. But what's important is that you're moving forward with something very specific in mind. And you're not just sort of like, blah, whatever, game, I made game and now it works. Now, we're going to have to be a bit more careful than that. Do not make a straight line, meaning don't have me spawn in, walk into the room that has the knowledge, and then further into the next room with Dr. MacGuffin. That's not a level, that is a straight path. And in that experience, the golden path, meaning the path that your player takes from start to finish, if they were to do everything right, is a straight line, and that is not a very interesting player arc. Now, you went through a lot of trouble to design a thematic goal and player arc for your player, what you want them to be feeling. So this map should be attempting to approach that design, those design goals. Okay. Also, they're not fun. That's boring. We're trying to make things fun because we're designers. All right. Add animation particles where it makes sense to. Now, only your own work, meaning don't take my things and just put them in. I want you to create your own animations and your own particle systems. And I'm going to show you how to do that today. Do not use my art. I just mentioned that, but you can use my stuff as a template. Okay. You may add art, but not from the asset store, and this isn't required. So you will be tasked with sharing this story of your players. We have a given story, and if this takes place in a hospital, you have to make it feel like a hospital. If this takes place in a laboratory, how do we make it feel like a laboratory? So you're going to start telling that story through visuals in the game, but you don't have to 3D model everything. And so you can kind of play around with some primitives and basics in Unity to make that happen. That's fine. I think you can have some real fun with glowy materials for things like that, and you can even do some simple meshes if you'd like to, but I would like for you to take caution with that. This is not required that you 3D model all of your assets in a week. That's a little insane, honestly, try to get that much work done. But deciding to put your own models in is fine. Remember that it is a lot of work if you aren't careful. So keep your meshes simple if you do that. You really don't have to go into intense texturing and you don't have to take it to the substance pipeline, right? Okay. All right, so the checklist. To get a C in this assignment, you must have a MacGuffin, Professor, Honest, which is your character spawn, and the knowledge in your map. It must not be a straight line. You must be showing your map that you created from before, if I didn't give you any feedback to change it. And you must use an explicit affordance. You must have materials, lighting, animation, particles, and a skybox. All of those things added. That is the bare minimum to get a C on this class in this assignment. So for an A, you have to have all of that, plus the use of any of the other types of affordances other than explicit. Now, if you remember, these affordances they become increasingly more difficult to do. I do not expect anybody to get inferred on that. You can try. That would be very impressive. And I think honestly for myself, it would take me weeks before I could even get something even close to an inferred affordance on something like this. So if you can't, don't worry about it. It's just there for thought. However, defined and cultural, you absolutely should be able to make that happen. And if you're unsure, again, please review the talk that I gave last week. Or reach out to me and we can go over it together again. All right, next. You must also show visuals of the story, meaning if you're just giving me simple boxes and color and flat lighting, you'll get a C, but I will need a little bit more context. So depending on where you're having your story take place, this could look differently. Maybe you have an indoor-outdoor, like a garden, and you go inside and there's a house, there's a mansion, I don't know. It has to start to feel like that space. And you have to do it using simple meshes or simple boxes and primitives. So start telling your story. Now remember, this was the given part of the story that everybody has. After all that has happened, Professor Tigonus knows what they have to do. They must find the knowledge in order to find Dr. MacGuffin immediately. You don't know where either is. Okay. What does that mean? Where can we go from here? You may take some liberty with Professor Honest, where you are telling the story where to go without signs. So, tools to guide the player. This is just a little reminder. Contrast, light, and movement will attract the eye. That will help your player find where to go. And you know how to do most of that already. I can probably start showing you how to do more things like movement, say with animation. Okay. You can use any of these things in the scene to tell the story. How would you do it? Have fun. That's an order. So submission instructions will be a little bit different. I'll want both a build and the package for your scene. So, in other words, name the build, your name plus the assignment underscore build, i.e. Neho Tigonus Part 2 underscore build. Name the zip folder, Neo underscore Tigonus Part 2 underscore build zip dot zip, right? And for the scene package, I want you to name the scene, your name underscore Tigonus Part 2 scene. I've noticed a lot of folks have not been naming their scenes. They're still just saying sample scene, and we have to start naming our stuff. So let's get into that habit. And save your scenes in the scene folder, which most of you have been doing. That's pretty great. So this is kind of redundant, but I thought I'd put it in there anyway for anybody who's a little unsure where they should be saving it. So the breadcrumbs will be assets, scenes, and then your scene. Okay, submit both the zip and the package into this assignment page. And next week we're going to be sharing each other's builds and we'll start play testing everything. So, do we have any questions so far? Hi, Lisa. Hi. Welcome. Good. Okay. All right. Okay, so with that in mind, I think that's everything on the assignment overview. Now I'm going to go back to sharing screens again, but this time it's going to be the Unity scene. Okay. So, don't panic if your scene doesn't look like mine. I got a skybox kit in here you could play around with. Well, I recommend that you do play around with Skybox, but it doesn't have to look like this. We've already gone over Skyboxes, so you should know how to do this if you want to. All right, so if you would be so kind as to download the particle package, the fire particle package from Canvas, and go ahead and import that into a scene, a clean one. It can be brand new or it can be whatever you're working in right now. It doesn't really matter. But if you go ahead and head into the project, and you'll find that I have a folder in here called Prefabulous, which is where I save prefabs, and we'll talk about that today too. And I've got environmental prefabs, and in this, if I were to just remove that, and I drag it and drop it on in here, I have pretty much everything set up without having to do anything. And that's kind of the beauty of a prefab. So how to do a prefab, I'll show you in a bit. For now, let's just take a look at the there we go. The actual particle system here. I've got a very basic mesh to start off with. And a material that it's called wood, but it's pretty much just like a flat albedo, and that's fine for the style of the game I was working on when I built this. So now, if I hit play, we'll see an animation of a particle system, which is actually 3 separate particle systems all within one. And I'm going to show you how to make these things. Isn't that going to be cool? All right. Now, you don't actually have to hit play to see these things sort of in the scene, But you do, I'm going to move that over here. If you select a particle system, it will animate for you. Here, got the embers effect, and then I've got the actual fire system first. Okay. This is not the only opportunity or the only reason that you would ever make a particle system is to make an effect like fire, though that's one of them, and it's one of the more obvious ones. Sometimes we make particle systems to bring ambience to the scene. Some of you have decided to do something a little spooky or uncomfortable. Especially if you're working on an interior space, having like large dust particles sort of floating around gives it a feeling of like old or like absence. People haven't been here in a long time. It's dirty, that kind of thing. I've had folks use falling leaves or little butterflies in here, or maybe you put some sparkly on an object that you want me to pick up or look at, which is closer to those explicit affordances that we talked about last week. So let's go ahead and just kind of remove this altogether, because we're going to make it from scratch using some of the assets that I've given you in that package. Okay, so let's start off with, not those meshes, environment. I think I've got this. Textures. Alright, I'm going to put you in here. 0. And down a little bit. Yeah, sure. Okay, so I've got my little wood in here, and I'm going to give it that material it originally had, because it's going to bother me if I don't. Okay, alright, neat. So, the first thing we probably want to make that would be most obvious was the fire, right? Like, because we want fire. And without the fire, the smoke and the embers, while look cool, they're just kind of like not really a thing. Like, why would you have embers or smoke if you didn't have fire? Well, I mean, I guess you could have smoke before the fire, technically. Okay, I'm not trying to get into a philosophical conversation about that. But let's go ahead and get started with a brand new particle system. So what you can do is you can either in the hierarchy, woohoo, or in the scene, do add effects particle system. Boom. Yay, we have a particle system. So now that this thing is live, you can kind of move it around as you want to. It's pretty neat. What I'll often do, first, let's name this. We'll call this fire_PS for particle system. Why not? I will often parent them to an object that it has a relationship with, and in this case it does the wood pile, right? And I will zero it out so it's centered, so it's right in the middle of the mesh. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean it needs to live there, but it's definitely a good place to start, right? If I wanted to maybe move it up, I could do that, but I don't even know if I want to yet. It's just, that's where it's going to live. So, what is the first blaringly, obviously terrible thing about this that needs attention? Give you guys a chance to talk. It's not the right effect? Yeah, that's true. I'm assuming you mean that looks like, it looks like a bunch of white spots when we want it to look like fire, right? So, yeah, it's fairy dust, exactly. This is Unity's default material that they use on their particles. And so, like, on the right in the inspector, when you've got a particle system selected, there's a whole bunch of stuff that you could start playing with. The very top, which is like, this is like your home base of things that you can start adjusting. The duration is how long they last. We'll do 5 seconds. That is seconds, by the way. And like, let's pull back a little bit and count from the start of a particle to the death. How long does it take? So we'll go here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, bloop. So duration is its lifespan, how long it lives. And if I want this to be, say, like 10 seconds, they will start to go much higher, right? Because they'll live longer. So instead of blooping out in the middle there, or not. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Ooh, nope. I'm wrong about that. Did I mess up by not? Hold on. Huh. Okay, well, it's just staying 5 seconds. Well, I won't worry about that then. Weird. Oh, start life. Oh, start lifespan. This is what I'm talking about. Sorry, I confused duration with lifetime. Duration is the length of time the particle is emitting particles of the system is looping. So it lasts a 5-second loop if it's looping. That's where I got confused. Sorry, guys. Okay. Which, that's handy too, by the way. If you're ever like trying to remember what something does in here, if you hover over it, it'll give you a little explanation, which is good because I've been working in this thing for like a million years and I still forget stuff. All right. Okay, so I don't want this to live for 5 or 10 seconds. I'll just, I'll leave that alone for now. We just decide that we don't want this to be this fairy dust thing, right? That was the first thing that we decided. Okay, so if we go down to renderer, which we all know means what the computer tells us it looks like, right? We'll go into a deeper conversation about that on another time. But renderer, if you open this up, we've got some things that actually start to make a little bit more sense to us. It's asking for a material. Ooh, a trail material. That could be fun. Not what we want to do. But the first thing we want to do is we want to get rid of this default particle, right? Like, that's not at all what we want. Do-do-do. Excuse me. Okay. Since this is not what we want to do, we can choose another particle, but what I don't want you to do, ooh, those are cool. What I don't want you to do is to just pick another thing that you found in here. You probably already find the fire particle in here if you do that. We're going to make our own, okay? So, in here, let's create a folder. I'm going to call it Particle System Materials. Why not? In here, right-click, Create Material. Do. Call this fire underscore ps underscore mat. Fire particle system material. All right, why not? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change this from the default material type to the particle system shader. Now, this is very important. Do you remember the talk when I mentioned that these shaders sometimes do a lot of work? Because that's the mathematic equation that's pumping out all of these different features, right? In the standard, we have a specularity, a metallic, emission, all of these things that all interpret light and render it with a fall off. And it will interpret more information if you were to do a lighting bake. There's just a lot of things that this particle will not need. And look at how many particles are alive and well in a single frame. Asking Unity to do all of this calculation hundreds of times is unreasonable and very, very, very not optimal. So we don't want to do that. So let's go ahead and drop the standard from standard to particles. And now we've got standard unlit. Hey, that's right. Let's do standard unlit. Okay, looks good to me. All right, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a texture, a material. So this was already created for you. And anybody here have a little bit of animation experience? Nope, not yet? Okay. Okay. So what I'm going to go ahead and do here is I'm going to open it up, probably in Photoshop, and we'll let it think. Let's see. Let that open up for a second, and then I'll show you. So if we can see in here, we've got a little preview in Unity. This is what we'd call a sprite sheet or an animation sheet. And Unity is pretty fancy in that it will default how textures are read pretty much how you would read in Western languages. So from left to right, top to bottom, think of this as though this is frame 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we go right on down here, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, right? So this is telling a story of an animation here. This is if we were to flip through these in a flip book, we would have an animation. All right, let me stop sharing here, and then I'm going to share in Photoshop. Go. Okay. This here is the sprite sheet that I painted a while back. It's not really very fascinating if you look at it up close, but it does move well. And if something that I want to show you in this, though, is a direct relationship to how the material is going to be read in Unity. So first off, let me pull up channels. Channels. Now, we know the RGB channels. This is the red, green, and blue all showing everything. The red channel is pretty much 100% all over. Green has a little bit of information here. Blue has very little. But overall, we've got... Ooh, no! Didn't mean to do that. We've got all of the channels that make up the image that we see here. But we also have something called an alpha. And if you notice, that alpha is very blurry. And it's black and white, and this is going to have a lot more meaning in a bit. But I wanted you to see that this alpha channel matters a lot. So if we were to save this particle system, I save them as a targa because they use... Actually, can you see the window when I pull up the save on this? Out of curiosity? Yep, okay, cool. I wasn't sure because Zoom's screen share is a little strange, you know. When I save this as a targa, it's going to ask me, yes, I want to replace it. It's going to ask me this question. What resolution, 16, 24, or 32-bit? This is very important that whenever you use an alpha channel, which is a spare channel for data, that's it, you click 32-bit. If you click 24-bit, it doesn't save the alpha channel in memory outside of this. So it's very important that you use 32-bit. When you are not using an alpha channel, you'll want to save your texture files at 24-bit. Otherwise, you're wasting memory. So this is important to know as artists. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back to Unity. Okay, so now that we've got, I want the materials. Find the material. This is what I was working on. This is close, but not really what we want. So let's take a look at some of the other features in this particle shader. Okay, cutout. Cutout's fun. Cutout is a more optimized use of transparency. And let's talk about this for a second. When working in computer science and we'll say scripting overall, there are types of data. And anybody heard of a Boolean? Boolean. Yep, maybe? Okay. Can you describe a Boolean to me? Like wherever you've used it. It's very likely maybe you used it as a tool in Maya. This is where something can be taken away from two items. Kind of. That's one way to interpret it. So a Boolean is a type of data that is either yes or no. Like in ZBrush, for instance. Yes. Okay. Very good. Okay, so let's think about what that Boolean tool does. You can select out space and tell it to add or take away. Exist or don't exist. True or false. 1 or 0. Yes or no. A Boolean is that type of choice. So with cutout, what this is telling us is that it's a Boolean in that that alpha channel that we shared before, it's got black and white and then a fall off of grayscale. And what this is saying in cutoff is that we're going to choose a Boolean where that cutoff is going to be and how much to render. So yes or no. So that's what cutout does. And what's nice about that is that it's a very quick calculation, so it's a lot more optimized to use a cutout. But maybe that's not the feel that we want to do. Fade is nice. It looks blurrier. Now that looks a lot closer to the alpha channel that we used before. So let's see. Transparent, no. Additive? Ooh, additive is nice. It says it got a pretty glow. So now we've got different types of rendering modes. No. Subtractive? No. Overlay? Oh! No. Like multiply. And rendering mode, additive, where it uses that fall off. Okay, so this is closer to, I think, what we want our fire to look like when it renders, right? Are we pretty comfortable with that? Okay, cool. All right, moving on. Let's head back to our particle system. So now I'm going to put my fire particle on the material here, because we made a fire material. So to do that, head on down towards the bottom where it says renderer. We're going to assign that material to it now. Well, there's two of them. That's good. Looks like we made some good choices here. And that's not what we want at all. Okay, well, it's working. It's definitely working. What's wrong? What should we do next? Tell me what looks terrible. It's showing all of them. It's not displaying the individual frames. That's the biggest bleh. I agree. I hate that. Okay, so if we kind of scroll up here, we look in the inspector while we have the particle system selected. You can see that there's a bunch of features that we can play around with. Let's see if any of these start to make sense. We'll say here velocity, over life, color, size, speed, animation, external noise, collision triggers. Ooh, texture sheet animation. That sounds fun. What if I turn that on? Well, first off, you'll notice that when you open it up, just by clicking on the bar, it will minimize and maximize it. It's all grayed out unless I turn on true. Okay? So we've got a grid mode selected. It's still not doing it. Is there a value in here that you can see maybe wanting to change to make this work? I need to take this away from me or else it'll just keep slurping in your ears. Is there an X and Y? There is an X and Y. Right mirror. Interesting. So where it says tiles, can you see this very well? It might actually be tough to see, and I didn't take that into account when I asked y'all that question. It might be blurry. Okay. So right here where it says tiles, there is an X and Y value, and in that value right now by default it says 1. So if there's 1 by 1, how many tiles is it rendering to animate? It's just 1, right? 1 times 1 is 1. So if we look at our actual sprite sheet, how many should the X and Y tiles be? Hey. 4 by 4. Yeah, that's right. So let's go ahead and add that. Not in renderer. Here. 4 by... Hey. 4. Hey, look at that. They're animating. Okay, what's next? What else is wrong? What's wrong now? We did that. That looks pretty good. They're flying out. Agreed. They agreed. Okay, so let's look at emission. So 10. What happens if I make this like 1? Okay. Well, I won't worry about that too much. Let's look at shape. Oh, okay. Okay, this is giving me some context. So what you can do is you could go in here and try to like resize this, but don't. What you're kind of doing when you do that is you're giving this value something else to calculate. They need to stay static in the location as well. I agree. First thing I want to do is I want to fix the rotation on this to not be negative 90 degrees. I want that to be 0, 0, 0. That's also not what we want though. Well, if I come on in here into the shape, and let's give this 90? No, let's do negative 90. Negative 90, there we go. Scale of x is 0. Oh, okay, so let's put you at 0 and you at 0. Okay, well at least it's not going like out anymore, it's just going straight up. We did fix some of the axes, but we don't want it to be flying off. Let's look at some of these other values that we can start playing with. Speed. Well, probably shouldn't be moving at all. So what if I, ooh. Well, okay, there's, it's looking better. It's looking better. So how about I give it, let's see, the start size. Let's do 2. Okay. 3. Alright, I like that size. I don't like how it's all overlapping. It is staying static though when we remove the speed from it, so that's good. Let's see. Let's say 1. Let's say 0. 0.5. That is the animation, but we don't want it to live that long. Lifetime. 1. Ooh. Now we're getting somewhere. 2. 1. Alright. So what I'm doing is I'm playing with the speed of its lifetime, how long it lives. Loops again. 1. Ooh, there we go. So if I set the rate over time 1, duration 1, which didn't do anything anyway, and the start lifetime to 1, speed to 0, we've got something resembling an animated fire here. It's pretty good. Pretty good. I often find that I will need to play around with those settings. I don't love the size of this, so I'm going to increase the size to 5, I think. And I'm going to move it up a bit, because fire is a little bit above the wood, I think. And it's not like this far above the wood, but you can imagine almost if you're trying to do a candle, it could probably be above the wick. Okay, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Alright, alright. Very nice, very nice. Okay, looking pretty good. I would probably go in here and do some polish into the material, maybe make it faded, and then you could be additive. Ooh. It's a little much. Overlay. Ooh, I don't know. Oh, blue fire. Cool. Alright, maybe that's exactly how it should be. I don't know. But now, our fire particle works. It's pretty fun. Pretty fun. Okay, let's see here. Next, let's play around with the smoke. The smoke is going to behave differently than the fire, so we have to ask ourselves a lot of these same questions. Smoke would not fall down. It wouldn't spread out. Well, maybe spread out. Maybe this is going to be easier than it feels. So, what's the first thing I got to do if I'm going to make a smoke particle? We just did it, so we can do it again. Or sprite. Okay, yeah, let's make it a material, right? Sure. Okay, so let's create material. We'll call this smoke particle system underscore map. Yay. Change that shader because we definitely don't want the standard shader. We'll do particles. I like unlit. Unlit means that it's not going to take in any lighting information, by the way. If you want a glowy effect or a cartoony effect, that will work really well. If you need it to take in like shadow or light from your scene, you'll want to use the standard surface. But we want unlit. So let's see here. Smoke. It has a texture, which I made for you. Now, I chose this design very purposefully. Notice that there's very, very little detail to this. And if I'm going to go ahead and open it up. Okay. And I'm going to share that Photoshop with you again. Okay. Okay, yeah. We're sharing Photoshop. Good. Okay, so again, the alpha is doing all of the heavy lifting in this, and I made sure that I didn't have any outline along the clouds so that if I used this stamped all over, it would kind of create the effect of different weird shaped clouds. So I actually made it as simple as possible for that very specific reason. So maybe we'll see how that pans out for us. So let's kind of come back to our fire. We've got our smoke particle material anyway. Sure. Oh, wait. There we go. We will want to give it additive, maybe. Multiplied. Not transparent. I think cutout will work best for this. Just because there's not a lot of variation between sort of the fire fall off. Now, the fire had a gradient fall off on its alpha channel, and that gave me more to work with. But with this guy, we've got a hard line cutoff. So cutout makes sense in this case. I'm gonna leave that. Let's go ahead and make that particle system. Effects, particle system. We're gonna name you smoke. Underscore PS. And now, let's go ahead at the bottom, under renderer, let's add our particle system. Okay. Alright, what should I do next? I guess there's too many at once. Maybe. There could be too many at once. But do you want... It sounds like maybe you want one to just kind of do it? Or do you want it to create a big cloud before? Now, I do have a reference that we can take a look at. Pretty fabulous. So it's actually pumping out a lot at once as well, but it's not pumping it out like this. This is just like all spread out everywhere, right? Okay, so I guess too many at once. The scale could also be changed. Yeah. Okay. Now let's scare rid of you again. The scale is definitely kind of a problem. So when we go back to our particle system, right here, we can change its start size. So that's 1, 5. But that's kind of a problem, isn't it? Like, it doesn't change its size. When you think about smoke, it sort of starts and then becomes billowy and bigger. Let's see. Ooh. So by playing with the start size, if you drop this little arrow down right here, we can change it from constant. As a constant, it stays the same. To a curve, maybe that makes some sense here. So I feel like the cloud or the smoke should start here, and maybe the start size should be smaller. Like it should start at 0 and become more. And what if we made it 5? Ooh, okay. Ooh, it's okay, so it's starting off little to big. Ooh, okay, that's fun, but not what we want. Not what we want. This is just the start. It doesn't actually go from its lifetime. Well, okay then. So let's bring it back to constant, and I guess we don't care about that. So let's go ahead and just go down and see what else there could be. Oh, size over lifetime. Hey, that means we wanted the size to actually change from its birth to its death. That's kind of a weird metaphor, but I mean, sure. So let's, ooh. So just at the start, when I click on size over lifetime, and then I click on this little line right here, it's showing me that at the start of its life, it just gradually gets larger to 1, or I guess 100%, so it's 5. And I think if I changed the start size here, what if I did 1? Yeah. So, start size and the size over lifetime are relevant. They're related to each other. So what this is saying is 1 to 100% of its start size. So, what if we kind of put in a little thing here, we made it go, ooh, okay. Now, I kind of like it in that, like, it's going from little to big, and then what's it doing? It's just kind of bloping out. Does that feel right? I feel like little bubble pops. Pop, 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 pop. I think that means we should bring this down to 0, so it should get big and then small again. Yeah, okay. This curve, though, can maybe have a little bit more to it, like it, ew, there we go. Okay, so now from 0 to 100% of its size, maintain that size, and then near the end, go whoop. We can kind of play around with whoop, 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 whoop. That's kind of fun. I kind of just go with the feel of it. Maybe I want the start size to be a little bit bigger now. Let's play around with it. Let's play around. I don't know. Start size 10. Fun, but no. 7? No. 6? That's fun. Okay, so that's feeling more like smoke. Let's go back down to the size over lifetime. I want to see what other toys we can play with. It says random between 2 constants. That doesn't feel right. Random between 2 curves could be interesting. What if I made this 2, and then I pulled this guy down to 1, which is essentially the same as we had it before. 0. Okay, this time we're letting it become anywhere from 1 to twice its size, giving us a little bit of a variant on those clouds. Some of them will get to 1, some of them will get to 2, and then maybe we can play around with this again. I don't know, 3, 5? Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Okay, so now if we look at our game, I'm going to pull the camera up a little bit. If I hit play, we can kind of see the smoke billowing from the fire. That's a lot of smoke. Maybe we could tone it down if we wanted to. Okay. Fire, smoke. Okay. Let's see here. Let's play around with some other things and maybe make this juicy. Maybe make it fun. Oh, ooh, color over life. That could be interesting. Okay. So now I'm going to open up this color thing. Do you see the gradient editor here? Just to make sure that Zoom isn't hiding it. Thank you. Now, right now, it is giving me a blend of white. What if I was to start off... what if it became black at the very end? Yeah. Ooh. That could be fun. Noticing that you are. That's okay. I'll just leave it. Can turn black. Hey, that's pretty fun. I like that. Okay, that'll come in handy. Okay, what else can you do? What else can this color thing do? Ooh, this is an alpha. Oh. Meaning a gradient. Ooh. What's interesting about this is that it's fading away, which would work if I wasn't using a cutoff, but that's okay. Anyway, fun to play with. Good to know. Good to know. Okay. The next piece that I had made in my fire particle were the embers. Now, I mean, you can probably get away with just this. That looks pretty good. But I love embers. I think embers are very pretty. I think they're kind of romantic. Let's see what we had before when we played with this guy. Fire. Embers. Smoke. I'm going to actually select all of these things. I'm going to turn off the selection icon so we can see it in the gizmo. That's kind of fun. Right? I don't know. Let's do it. Let's do it. I don't want to hide it. I don't want to hide. Okay. Let's put up another particle. Game, add effects, particle system. We're going to marry it to our wood file here. We will call this embers _ particle system. I'm going to center it. Before I forget this time, I'm going to make you 0, 0, 0, because I didn't do that with the smoky thingy and then never changed the shape. So let's give this a negative 90. And alright, I am so sorry that the visuals cut out for that last portion of those particle systems. But the last bit of it were the embers. They weren't deeply complicated. I really think that if you follow along with the first two, you should be able to get the last one pretty okay, with the exception of, I will say that the noise feature in the particle system is really kind of where the magic of the weird movement of the embers really kind of came from. So with that exception aside, I'd say that you definitely got enough that you needed to be able to do to make a particle system from scratch. And then stay tuned for how to do animations. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on. Now, in the assignment, it calls for affordances that you'll need to be addressing. And the one to get the C grade of affordances is explicit. Now, if you remember in the talk, when I was talking about explicit affordances, these are the type of things that kind of pull you out of this being a world that you could be existing in, right? For example, when you're playing Uncharted and you are Nathan Drakeman, I think that's his name, right? And he's using a grappling hook. Well, players weren't getting that they needed to use a grappling hook at this particular place. So they have a little icon that pops up that says grappling hook, right? That's an explicit affordance. When it's like, hey, use this thing because we can't communicate it to you any other way, that we're going to use a little icon. So if you're a little unsure about a way to use an animation, an explicit affordance is a great way to check two boxes in your assignment. it will do the affordance, and it will use an animation to do it. So let's take a look at what we would need to do for that. Now, you know that if you played a particle system like this or a light over here, players are going to naturally be drawn to it, right? So that's one use of a particle system that you might want to be considerate of. Usually people want to go towards where there's contrast in your scene. So remember that. When lighting and like other clues in your scene are not doing the trick, an explicit affordance will definitely do that for you. So something that I like to do is, let's go ahead and look at some of the 3D objects that we could use. Capsule, plane, quad, cube. Sure. Sure. Why not? Right. I'm going to give you a material that is not the default. Ooh, lit, a limb, that's good. And I'll change the color a little bit. So whenever I'm using an object like this that I want to use like an explicit affordance, but honestly what I'll probably do is I'll model a pyramid upside down in Maya or Max or something and use that as an arrow. So let's pretend that that's what I'm doing right now. Let's change the color to a friendlier color. No. Let's do green. Green is a good friendly color. Like, look at me! Okay? And, you know, I'm actually kind of thinking a little bit like The Sims, where you've got the little thing above their head when you have a selection of a sim, right? Alright, so let's pretend that this is what we're going to use as a, hey, look at me! I'm an item you need to get. Right? Or you're just giving it like a spin, right? Like that's what I wanted to do in the scene when I hit play. So first thing I'm gonna do is set you to 0 so that in my scene we can see it. That's good. And now I'm gonna give it an animation. Okay. Don't worry, this demo is gonna go a little bit faster. So it's much easier to do animations in Unity than set up a particle system. I don't know, I guess it depends on who you talk to. So when you have an object selected, I'm gonna put like item get, look at me. I am going to select the animation tab. Now if you don't see it, you can find it if you head on up to Windows, Animation, Animation. You can also hit Control-6, which I never think to do, but you can do that. So click that. Alright, then when you've got the object selected, click Create, and Unity is going to ask you, where do you want me to put this animation file? I recommend always creating a folder for animations, because you're going to want to get comfortable keeping your scenes organized. Most of you have done pretty good about that, so I'm not too worried about you. Let's do rename, put animations. And I'm going to call this, look at me, anim. Okay, look at me. Alright, so here is where all the fun, the magic happens. Now, what's awesome about the animation system in Unity is that it's not just an animation system to make things move. You can animate lights to turn on and off. You can animate cameras. You can do a bunch of stuff. You can animate particle systems, meaning you can take a particle system and make it move. Like what you... So cool. Like, it's unstoppable. It's also not very optimal, but that's okay. We're just learning how to use it right now. Okay, so when you've got the item selected and you've created an anim file, .anim, click Add Property. Now, this is where you can kind of have a lot of fun with the types of animations that you can do. Like you can enable or disable a renderer, meaning you can see it, now you don't. Or you can make it a collider and then turn it into a trigger later or not, like depending on what kind of context you're giving it. That would make some sense. Like like a fire that has a trigger on it that will kill your character. Well, what if it gets big and small and your character has to time it? So you might have to animate the trigger or when it actually hurts you versus kill you or something like that. Anyway, I'm just kind of making up reasons why you would use these other other types of things to select. But in this case, we're going to animate its transformation. This is makes the most sense to us if you've had any animation experience, and if you haven't, well, that's okay. We're setting you up for that. So let's go ahead and animate its position first. Like, if I was to make this a look at me item, maybe I want it to bounce up and down. Pretty straightforward animation. I'm going to want to animate its position. So I'm going to hit plus sign, and it gives me 1 second of animation with the keyframes already plugged in here. Keyframe, keyframe. If I drop this down, it'll give me an XYZ coordinate, and it's set to 0 on all of it. So I'm really not changing anything on it yet. Well, there's a couple ways we can go about this. I can hit record, move the slider probably somewhere down the middle, and then literally just move it, and look what happens on my time slider. It gives me a keyframe. Now I've given it a value of, let's give it 4. I don't know. That feels fun. So now, whoop, whoop, whoop. Let's hit play. What happens? Hey! In my game scene, it's like, hey, look at me. Look at me. Pretty good. Alright. I like it. Wow, that was actually really easy. Let's add another property. Under transform, I want to do rotation. Okay. Maybe I want it to turn 160 degrees. Total 360. Sorry, not 160, 360. Now, there's a couple ways we can go about this. What you don't want to do is tell it at this last keyframe here to be back to 0, because then it just won't animation at all. If you put in here 180 and then 0, it'll animate 180 and then back. And it pretty much always animates clockwise unless you specifically tell it not to. So let's do the animation. I want to rotate it here in the middle. Let me go to the scene. Let's hit record, and I want to animate you negative 180. So look at how it's like animate 180, and it's animating backwards to get back to 0. Since I don't want that to be 0, I'm going to hit minus 360. So now, ooh, okay. Okay, that's looking pretty cool. What I don't necessarily love is that the animation has a ease in, ease out happening to its rotation. So if I wanted to play around with that, all I got to do is move from the dope sheet to the curves. And you'll see that I've got, okay, that's a little silly, guys. Ooh. And you'll see here that it like eases out to the spin and then blip. Well, what we can do is we just kind of strain that puppy out with our, there we go. So now there's no ease in, ease out, and it should just rotate all the way around, if that's what you want to. Okay, let's check it out. Woo, woo, woo. Look at me! Ah. I like it. Okay, maybe I don't want it to bounce quite up and down that high. I could edit here. Instead of from 4, let's do 2. Hey! It's starting to feel like an arrow or an icon. Look at me! If you have ghosts in your scene, maybe you have them, woo! That could be kind of fun. Have them dancing around your scene if you want it to be spooky. Or if you want it to be silly spooky, like, what's that game? The Luigi's Mansion? That could be fun. Okay. Alright. Let's play around with this. Let's play around. Let's add another property. Let's look at, not collider, let's do, is there a mesh renderer? Under priority, sorting order. Could blend its materials. Ooh, like that. Let's do enable. Item enable. And I'm gonna go back to the dope sheet. On. What if it here we want it off? Look at that. You can have it flashing. See? Pretty fun stuff. Okay. Okay. So these animation files, they're basically just set to go on play unless we set separate parameters on them. But in order to do that, we have to start introducing scripts, which we will do next week. So you might be thinking of ways to animate your levels, like maybe you'll have doors that will open, windows that could open, maybe you'll have, I don't know, you'd have some spookiness happening, you know, like a chair dance across the screen. Or maybe an item get sign would be pretty good. And you can play around with all different types of things to try to bring your character or bring your player to follow the golden path, which is, again, not a literal path made of gold, though you could do that if you want to. It's the path that you want your player to take from start to finish if they were to experience everything as you intended them to design by your design. Okay, so do we have any questions so far? Okay, good. All right, I think that was a lot of stuff that we covered today. So I am going to go ahead and call it there. I'll have two sections. One I have to heavily edit because I messed up the recording on the last part of it. And then also this animation stuff. The animation is really easy, but it can get very complicated very quickly. So just make sure you have a plan when you get started in that. And then I think you will be okay. All right. Okay. Reach out to me if you get stuck on anything.